Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next edition of AmiSights. I'm Ami Kassar, your host, along with my co-host, Lynn Ozer, a.k.a. SBA Queen. And today we have the podcast king on with us, John Corcoran, founder and CEO of Rise 25. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm honored to be here.
John, tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, your business, just what makes you tick.
Okay, geez, how much time we got? I'll try and be quick.
As much as you want.
Okay, well, I'll start with what's most memorable about me. So I started my career at the ripe old age of 23 years old working in the Clinton White House, which is probably the thing that's most memorable about me. I was a writer in presidential letters and messages, which I kind of joke is like a second-tier speechwriter. So, if the speechwriters like pulled a hamstring, then we'd get thrown in the game. And it was a great experience. It was multiple White Houses ago now, so
Really?
it's a very different animal now.
You think?
At least I think the White House was a big chunk of it was torn down last week, unfortunately. So hopefully the rest of it's still there. But yeah, I mean, it was an amazing experience. And the story that I like to tell is that, I grew up in a humble middle-class family. My dad was a journalist. My mom was a travel agent. We didn't have any special connections or anything like that. And for me, I studied successful people at a young age because I devoured biographies and autobiographies. And I was really curious what made people tick. And what I found was that it was relationships. It was the relationships that you build. And so many times you see that over and over again. If people build the right relationships with the right people, that will lead to success in your career. And so I applied that to my life. And that's how I got opportunities like working at the White House. And I continue to do that today. I have a company where we help businesses to start podcasts, and it's basically the same thing. It's helping people to do what we're doing right now, have amazing conversations with people that you admire, respect, or that you're just simply curious about, and to use that as a tool for moving forward both of your businesses.
Where did you come up with the idea for starting Rise 25? What origin?
Well, we're a classic case of building the business that the market wanted us to build, not the one that we wanted to build. So I had started a podcast 16 years ago. My business partner had started even before that. He was one of the true innovators in the field, had been a senior producer for one of the very early business podcasts. And so he and I started a business together, which was doing events. We would do events around the country, small little events, usually in conjunction with other conferences, like little mastermind format types of events. And I had a couple more kids. I've got 4 kids now. And I was like, I can't travel like this anymore. It was a bit of a burden. And at the same time, this was around 2017, 2018. A lot of people were coming to us and asking us, how did you start your podcast? How did you do it? And people would focus on the wrong things. We would see people try and start podcasts. We'd see people pod fade, which is, starting doing 10 episodes and then quitting. And so finally we were like, all right, I think the market's telling us we should help people with this. So we did. We started helping people, and then that became the thing that took off for us. And we love it because we're basically teaching other people how to build relationships in a way that fuels their business. And so that's really exciting for us.
When did you start?
Well, the business Rise 25 started around 2015, and the podcast element of it, the podcast focus of it, was really around 2017, 2018.
Perfect timing when everybody needed it before COVID. You were already 2 years or 3 years into it when I think that's when the explosion happened, right?
Yeah. Well, so I like to say, if you look at all the trend lines, all the charts now, we're 5 years past the start of COVID. It looks like a blip on the radar screen. So in other words, it's been up and to the right for about 20 years, just steadily up and down kind of thing. But everyone's awareness of podcasting really affects their awareness of when it seems like it became popular. So
Right.
for a lot of people, it was during COVID. But honestly, the market for podcasting is much larger today than it was 5 years ago when COVID started. So it's been really a consistent thing. I actually think it's part of a larger trend away from, 25 years ago, we had a handful of media companies, large media companies in this country. We had CBS, NBC, ESPN, Fox. Those were like the media companies, and they controlled all the media in this country. And then we had websites, and then we had podcasts, and then we have the social media explosion. And so now you have much more dispersion and distribution of media channels, and anyone can be a media company these days. And in fact, I would even argue that every company needs to have a media division. Really, they need to be creating their own media, because that's the way the modern economy works. And so that's, what people are doing today.
Right. It's absolutely essential to have a media presence, and if you don't, you're getting left behind. So, what is the number one item that you tell someone when they're starting a podcast? What is it that they need to do?
I don't know if there's one thing. There's a lot of
Okay,
different things. Let's see if we can mention a couple of them.
not the
One
first.
is, so I'm just talking about a B2B context. So I'm not talking about like building a
Right.
general entertainment
No.
podcast or something like
Right.
that.
Business.
So a lot of
to
times people, they'll look at successful podcasts like a Joe Rogan or a Mel Robbins or something like that, and they'll try and mimic those things. And that's a very different animal. It's like in other contexts, it's like a blockbuster movie versus a little indie documentary. Very different types of, animals. And so I would say if you're doing it for the purpose of a business, don't worry about copying what like Joe Rogan does. And you also don't need to get massive numbers. If you're using it for the purpose of your business, frankly, whether 10 people listen to it or 10,000 people listen to it, if you're just using it to interview your clients, your referral partners, your strategic partners, to interview centers of influence in your industry and network your way around, authors, speakers, that sort of thing, a lot of times people worry too much about getting massive download numbers or massive listenership. So that's a big piece, is just not worrying about that. And then also, people overanalyze and they have perfectionist tendencies. I was guilty of that in the early days, where I was too worried that everyone's going to see it. And the truth is, like, there's lots of media out there today. So not everyone in your network is going to see it at all times. So you don't need to worry about that. And then people have imposter syndrome too. People, for like, oh, who am I to do this? And why can't I do this? And should I be out there in front of it like this? People get really worried about that, worried about inviting their clients onto the podcast, when in fact, probably the client is if they see you doing a podcast, they're thinking like, why am I not included? Why hasn't he asked me yet? Or she asked me yet? So there's a lot of different things. And honestly, a lot of times the psychological barriers are one of the biggest barriers to people getting started.
So, John, what services do you offer somebody?
So we like to think of ourselves as the easy button. So, I wish that there was a solution like we have now when I started my podcast 16 years ago, because I had to piece it all together myself. I had to set up the RSS feed. I did hire someone to edit my audio, so I've never done any of the editing the audio myself, but I was a practicing attorney at the time. Of course, you pay a lawyer to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, to pay attention to the details. So I thought that the same standard of perfection that I applied to my client work, I needed to apply to the end product of the podcast. And so it consumed so much energy that I built fewer relationships because of it. And so it wasn't until I removed myself from that and let other people handle the details that it was more successful for me, because then I could maximize the number of conversations that I was having. So we aim to be that perfect back end partner that will handle all those details, so you can focus your energy and attention on building relationships. The people that do a podcast for a few months and then give up, oftentimes it's because they get stuck in the production process. They get exhausted by it. It drains their energy. They spend a bunch of time reading the show notes or poring over transcripts and making edits to it. And that's just frankly a waste of their time. And much better use of their time is for them to be having more conversations for the purpose of the podcast. So our goal is to allow them to do that.
Cool.
So, are you a post-production studio for anyone who
Yes,
wants to do a
that's part of
podcast?
that's part of what we do. I like to say that it's a three-legged stool that you need in order to be successful with it, that most companies need. And the three legs are: one, the right strategy, which a lot of people get wrong; second, an external accountability partner is going to hold you accountable, just like, the best athletes need a coach. You do as well. And then the third piece is the production piece, to help have someone handle all the back end productions. And those are really the three legs of the stool that will make it successful in most instances.
Cool. So you guys have a successful business going, you're offering this service. Is it getting easier or harder to get clients?
It's a good question. In some ways, I'll be honest, it's gotten harder because there are more competitors out there. And there's also more attention to digital media. So there's people that are starting YouTube channels and doing social media and things like that. So some of those things are harder. In some ways, it's gotten easier because there's more awareness of what a podcast is and what it can do. So, I think it's probably gotten harder because there's more competitors out there. And because it's not like when in 2018, 2019, we didn't really have many competitors at all. And so now, yeah, it definitely is something else that we have to contend with.
How do you approach your marketing?
Well, we eat what we walk our talk, right? So, we do a lot of podcasts ourselves. So that's a big one. In fact, this year, at the beginning of the year, I look back and I realized, you know what? I haven't really been walking our talk enough. And so the last few years, I've just been doing a weekly podcast. So this year I decided I'm going to double down on it. I'm going to do probably about 200, 225 interviews this year for my podcast alone.
Wow.
And so ask me next year how it went. We'll be interested to see if there's more of an impact. So far, I feel like there is. I'm having a lot more conversations for the purpose of the podcast. And again, I take myself out of any of the other pieces. So we utilize it in a lot of different ways. So that's a big, so doing our own, but then, the example I always give is, Google mails out postcards for clients. Google, like the most digitally native company out there, uses other channels to acquire customers for their services. Why do they do that? They do that because it works. And so oftentimes going through a different channel can be effective. We've been working on developing that. I think SEO is one area that we haven't invested enough into. And that's obviously changing a lot with AI. I actually started an EO WhatsApp group to discuss these things, the changes that are happening with AI through SEO. So there's some other areas like that we've been investing in.
That's Ami's favorite topic. Are you going to ask him about AI?
Yeah. I love talking about AI.
The answer to the following question might be it's hard, or maybe it's a soft measurement. And I'm a big believer you can't measure everything. And nor should you try to measure everything. Sometimes you just do things because they feel right intuitively. Like we do a podcast, we've been doing it for years. If you ask me how to measure the success of our impact of our podcast, I have no idea, right? And I'm okay with that. But a lot of people...
Should we be measuring that?
That's what I want to...
That's a good question.
I want to
for
ask John what he thinks about that.
Well, I think it could be that you're unique in that you get psychic value out of connecting with people and interviewing people. It might also be that you're actually getting more value out of it than you realize.
I think I am getting value out of it, but if you ask me to quantify it, don't have a clue.
Yeah. Usually what I say is that you'll know when you get value out of it because you'll get a client who hires you, and you wouldn't have had them hiring you if it weren't for a particular interview that you did. But there's also
a couple of years ago, I had at the time the president of our chapter on the show, and her woman reached out to me and said, "Oh my God, we've got 2 clients out of the podcast. Thank you so much." And I was like,
"That's great."
I was like, "Really?"
Yeah. I mean and you make a friend for life when you do that,
Absolutely.
When they get clients from it, then they're deeply appreciative, and it's nice because you've got a venue that you can help promote people that you care about. So, this happens to me all the time that someone, has a book coming out or they have a new business launching or they have some new business initiative or something like that, or some new community that they're starting or an event that they're doing. And I'm like, hey, come on the podcast. Let's talk about it. And that really adds up over time. People are appreciative of that. And then they in turn will want to repay the favor. Now, there are ways you can be deliberate about that. So when you repay the favor to people, when you bring people on your podcast, one of the things I highly recommend is always asking guests for other guest recommendations. And those other guest recommendations should be people that are good people for you to know. So they are good prospective clients. They are good prospective referral partners. They're good strategic partners. They're, things like that. So being deliberate about it through the podcast can also lead to more ROI for you.
John, how has AI changed how you work or how you think about your product or your services?
Yeah. Well, couple of thoughts. One, like everyone else, we are looking at ways that we can use AI to speed up what we're doing and produce a more consistent end product that is on brand for all of our clients' brands. But in addition to that, I believe that as we move forward in the very near future, if not right now, we're not going to be able to tell what is real and what is fake online. Whether it's a photo, whether it's a video, or whether it's a tweet, we're not going to be able to tell, is this real, is this fake? And so because of that, I think that things that can't be faked are going to be more valuable for us. So in-person connecting with people is going to be more valuable if everything else that we see online we can't trust or we don't know if it's real or not. And so part of us just kind of discounts it in our brain. And so this can't be faked. At least I hope it can't be faked. Maybe at some point in the future it will be. There will be a way that we absolutely can't tell when we're talking to someone over digital. If that's the case, we're gonna have to, attack that as a society and figure out ways around that. But I think that because of that, you know, connecting with people in a genuine way, whether it's in person or whether it's online, which is what a podcast is really about, is going to be important in the years ahead. And yes, people can make they can make AI powered podcasts these days. And right now you can pretty much tell. And I haven't seen any impact for that in terms of businesses. There are people that are, they could put out, if they wanted to, a daily podcast or multiple per day podcasts. That's not the area of the swimming pool that I'm swimming in and that our clients are swimming in. So I don't really worry about that kind of thing threatening what we do.
Cool. John, as you think about the future of your business, what do you see?
I have thought for a while that there will be more consolidation in our area. And so we're looking at that now, looking at like other companies that we can partner with. I also think that the trend lines over the last 20 years of podcasts have been consistently been growing and growing across all the different stats, from listenership to the amount of time that people listen, to the number of podcasts that they listen to general awareness, all these sorts of things. All these things have been going up consistently over time. I think it's part of a larger shift from, as I mentioned earlier, a handful of very large media companies 25 years ago to now any company can be a media company. So I think that trend line will continue. I think, if I say that if someone held a gun to my head and they said your website or your podcast, pick one, I would pick my podcast. A website, of course, is basically table stakes these days. You need to have a website. But let's face it, a website for most people is a fancy brochure on the internet. A podcast is a tool for relationship building. It's a tool for connecting with people that you respect, you admire, and who you want to hold them up. And so I believe that will be important as long as people are doing business with other people.
Yeah, I tell the story. We started 16 years ago, and we launched our second website maybe 15 years ago. And the woman who helped develop it insisted we had a blog on it. And I don't have time to blog. And so I convinced a friend of mine to write the first 5 blog posts for the website, which he did. And then we launched it. And then he proceeded to tell me, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. And I was like, shit, I got this blog now. What the hell am I going to do? And it forced me to start blogging and start producing content, thought leadership out there. And it was a little bit therapeutic, but over time, it kind of became a lot of our brand. And then those blogs, which I probably used to send them to you, Lynn, I would send to everyone and their mother who would read it. Eventually, the guy who we just had on our podcast earlier, Lauren Feldman from 21 Hats, was at the New York Times. And then he asked me to write for him based on the blog post. Okay. and then it evolved. And if you think about podcasting, it's kind of an extension of blogging.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it is a way of talking out your blog content. And actually,
Right.
I used to write a lot. That's my background. I was a writer in the White House. I was a speechwriter for a governor of California. I was an attorney writing legal briefs. I've written a ton. But what I found is that it's easier to talk out your content, and you can also build relationships at the same time. And many times it just goes in the same spot on your website. It goes in the blog section. It's just
Right.
formatted slightly differently,
Right.
but the most important
Right.
thing is that you're putting fresh content out there. So for those of you out there who are watching this, who have the discipline like Ami to sit down and write a blog post on a consistent, regular basis, more power to you. Go keep on doing that. I also think it's important and valuable for you to go build in relationships with people, and a podcast can help you do that. But however you're creating that fresh content and putting it on your website, just do it, because the modern web depends on it. And, Google and all the other search engines out there are not going to find you if you're not putting out fresh content.
I agree 100%.
But back to, the fact that building relationships and talking, um, the authenticity of it and the believability of it, I fear for people who now listen to untruths or AI or whatever. How do people discern the difference between the AI? What if they made an AI version of you and Ami and me? How would they know?
Yeah,
How would
that's
they know?
true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a number of different thoughts on this. So one is, there's kind of a backlash right now. I think that will continue to happen for a little while before AI is not a buzzword anymore. Eventually, AI is going to be like spell check on steroids or grammar on steroids. No one looks at like a blog post and they're like, they use Grammarly to write this, or they use spell check to write this. And so AI is really a tool for writing content. Why do people feel like there's the backlash against AI written content? Because oftentimes it doesn't truly sound like it's the tone of a human writing it. It's kind of generic. That will evolve over time, and it will get better at mimicking people's tones. And then people will probably use it, and there won't be a backlash because you won't be able to tell. And it'll allow people to produce more content more regularly. And so I think that's a good thing, because your content ultimately is educating your market. You're telling people a lot of different things. So I think there's a lot of good things. But I want to ask about something. I mean, you said a second ago that Lynn was probably reading your blog posts years ago. I want to dive into that a little bit more. Is that true, Lynn? Do you recall
I
that?
was sending to her. Was she reading them? That's a different question.
No, I would see and I would get and read Ami's podcast. Sure. Yeah. I mean, his blogs at the time. Yeah. Some of them, some people's I wasn't reading, but I knew what he was doing, and it was, in my world and the just curiosity about, who he was reaching and how he was doing it and so forth, and what
That's
he was
great. And so
learning
that's what's
about
so
lending and lenders and
And
behaviors.
that's what's so great about putting out content, is it allows you to maintain relationships with wide numbers of people, whether it's one person reading or 100,000 people reading. And it also allows them to have a better insight into how you think about various different things. And so then when it
Mhm.
comes time when they need your solution, then they think of you. You're top of mind because
You're
they've
right.
been reading it. Yeah. I'll tell you a story. There's this picture I have with this guy here,
Yeah.
and I met this guy. I'm holding up a picture of me with Elon Musk. This is
Yeah.
from around 2010. And at the time, he was not at all well known like he is now. And I went to an event for Tesla when it was just a obscure Silicon Valley startup. Bless you. It was an obscure Silicon Valley startup, and I met him and was interested in what he was doing. And I thought at the time, I just started my podcast, and I thought at the time I should invite him on my podcast. I'm sure he would have come because he had nothing better to do. He wasn't as busy as he is now. And I didn't invite him on. And so I regret that I didn't invite him on at that time. Now, there's been other people that I've had on that are not as well, maybe not as famous as him, but co-founder of Netflix, people like that. So give it a shot. What's the harm? It's always, you can always try.
Right.
Worst they can say is no.
I wouldn't really
Exactly.
care. I wouldn't really care if she did, but if she said yes, it'd be okay.
It would be
Yeah.
nice. It would be really fun. Yeah, we
Yeah.
should
Or,
do that.
honestly, another thing you could do is you could invite past administrators of the SBA,
Mm,
because that might be interesting too. And then when you come around and you invite the current administrator, then you could say, hey, some of the people we've had on are this person, this person, this person, these past administrators of the SBA. Then it kind of becomes, okay, that gives her a little bit of cover. I see, oh, okay, this is a podcast that has had, other administrators
Right.
on. So therefore it's okay for her to say yes.
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
we've never really tried to. I don't know if I'd call her famous. We've never really tried. That's never really been our theme. We've just had guests on we think are interesting, and it's worked pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, it your business is built on your knowledge and expertise around the SBA. So from a prospective client's vantage point, the fact that you've had previous administrators of the SBA on, that just bestows more expertise and gives you more authority. I think, will it directly lead to clients? I don't know, but it definitely will help to cement your legacy and your authority as an expert in that field.
It's interesting whether we're right or wrong about it. At least how we approach a lot of our marketing is that people need financing maybe a couple times in their career. So we and when you're not in the market for it or you're not interested in it, you find the content to be frankly a little bit boring. So we work hard to produce just interesting general business content with that name so that people remember us. I can often go and give a speech somewhere and sometimes people call 3 or 5 years later.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Well, you do benefit in that it's aspirational. So even people who don't need financing now, they one day think of selling their business or buying a business or something like that. I was a lawyer for many years. A lot of the stuff that I would try and create content on was very narrow, specific little things that was not aspirational. It was more like, it's like insurance. Like it was like something you kind of need, but not something you get all that excited about, studying over,
Right.
at length. So that was a difficult area to create content around. And that's partly what brought me into the world of entrepreneurship, because I got excited about creating content around building businesses, partnering with other businesses. And so it kind of eventually moved beyond just the legal advice around building a business, but other things that you need to do in order to build a successful business.
do you miss being a lawyer?
Not at all.
Then do you miss being a banker?
No, 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 because as you move along, and you know this, Almi, and you move along in your career in corporate America, you get further away from why you were in it to begin with. And that was to interact with entrepreneurs and hear their story and see how you can help them. And working at multi-funding brings you back to, or brings me back to the reason that I loved what I did for so many years. And it wasn't the corporate structure of being a banker. It was being able to help someone achieve their goals and their dreams.
Yeah, that's
John, did you
great.
say you have 4 kids?
I have 4 kids.
How do you manage 4 kids and building a company?
It's a great
Well, my
question.
wife is amazing, so she deserves the vast majority of the credit. She does such a great job of at balancing them. Fortunately, some of them are a little bit older now. Like this week, they're all off at noon for some reason, a conference week, and so we have to rejigger childcare. But the oldest is 15, second oldest is 11, and then we have a 9-year-old and we have almost 7-year-old. And so, yeah, you just balance it. I have an office that is a 2.5 miles from my house. My office is actually super close to my daughter's school, so if someone gets sick or gets get picked up in the middle of the day, I fortunately have flexibility. I've got lots of, I live here. I'm a 15-minute commute from San Francisco, so a lot of other parents are working for OpenAI and Google and Meta and these big companies and stuff like that. And I don't know how they do it. It's difficult to balance a career and child rearing. It's not easy.
John, if you visualize your company and your life 2-3 years from now, what do you see?
I see us serving. Our BHAG has always been to become the number one go-to provider of B2B podcasts, helping B2B businesses that want to start a podcast and find the process overwhelming to make it easier on them. And so just doing more of that for more companies is what gets us out of bed in the morning.
I love it. Do you
I
ever think
think it's
about
great.
offering a suite of services to people who've been at it for a couple years, but maybe want to get better at it?
Yeah, we've got lots of clients like that that come to us and been doing it a little while and they want to know how to optimize it better, or they have been managing it in house and they're tired of handling that themselves, and they want to be like me, going from a handful of conversations, or I mean, there's lots that like are doing it, but they're just not doing it to their full potential.
Right.
So that does happen a lot.
I think that being there to help them realize just how far their reach could be, or just how much the podcast can enhance what they're probably already doing, it's
And
super.
there's so many ways. I mean, so my business partner, Jeremy, who Ami knows, I get ideas from him all the time. And I've been doing my podcast for 16 years. So there's so many other ways you can use a podcast. Like, have you guys ever gone to a conference and recorded episodes out of a conference?
Well, sorta, kinda. We
Sorta,
tried to
kinda.
do that.
Yeah,
We tried to do it. It was a good
well,
idea.
snafu.
Yeah, we had a production snafu, but
So
yeah, that's a great
gets to
idea.
this. Well, that gets to the strategy around it, right? Like, maybe the problem was, I don't know, but maybe the problem was that you were handling too much of it yourself. I prefer to hire a videographer, even if I'm not going to use the video, just someone else handling the technical pieces so I can focus. There's a lot of different issues you have to deal with when it comes to doing interviews on the fly, on the floor of a conference. You have to deal with like who you're interviewing, what questions you're going to ask them, all that kind of stuff. So like having to handle that technical stuff as well is too much. But yeah, I mean, that's a great way to use a podcast. So there's lots of people that start podcasts and they're not even using it to its full potential.
John, if our users want to learn more
Yes.
about Rise 25, where do they go?
.com, or you can email us, support@rise25, or John at rise25. Any of those will be great.
I asked you where did the name come from? Kind of interesting.
Yeah, great question. So we were looking around for a name. Took us forever to pick a name, and we liked the idea of rising tides lifts all boats. That just kind of stuck with us.
Right.
And then the idea of the 25 was there's only 24 hours in a day, but everyone's searching for that 25th hour. And for us, your network is really your 25th hour. That's the thing that really helps you. And so we did the combination of the two, plus the fact that it was a 6-letter domain, which is not too easy to come by these days. We're like, okay, perfect. That's it for us.
It's great. Rise 20.
John, always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Likewise.
Hope to see you somewhere out in the circuit real soon. And thanks for all you do to help all EO.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
Great meeting you.
Thanks so much, buddy.